Hey there, and welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast. We're fueled by the incredible clients who inspire us every day, allowing us to elevate their health and fitness journeys. On this show, you'll gain valuable insights from top professionals, hear inspiring transformation stories, and discover the knowledge and motivation to create your own best life. Let's dive in. As someone who has continuously used therapy as a way to heal and elevate my personal performance, I know wholeheartedly that you cannot always read the label when you're in the jar. And that's why it's so helpful to have a professional in your corner to talk to. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp to provide our listeners with the opportunity to work with a licensed therapist from the comfort of your own home. Receive 10% off your first month when you sign up by going to betterhelp.com/TFL. That's betterhelp.com/T as in think, F as in fitness, L as in life. And remember, you're not alone. There are people out there who can help.
Just like what you didn't have, maybe what you didn't have. And I wrote down a couple things and I thought I'd ask you to make sure, kind of like I'm really passionate about mindful eating and using that to master your nutrition, and also the side of emotional eating. And I know you had one on like healing your relationship with food. So anyway, that was kind of what I wrote down. I don't know where you want to head for your audience specifically.
I like that. Because a lot of people, I think it's a touchy subject. A lot of people don't want to dive into the emotional side of food, and they just want to say, oh, well, okay, moderation. And that's one big thing that I've always struggled with as a coach, because it's either a go or no go with food. Right. I tell people you got to cut stuff out, but I have a hard time telling people, hey, moderation's okay, because I can't trust their neurological side of things and their emotions towards it.
Yeah. Yes.
So fire away. Let's dive in.
Okay, let's do it. Does it really quick? You're over here on my camera. Would it look bad if I look at you, or does it look better if I look at the camera? Is that weird?
You can go back and forth.
Okay.
It's the same for me. It's sort of up here, but then I kind of look at you on the screen. So
okay. I just want to make sure it doesn't look weird, but it's easier to talk. I tried to do it while not looking at the presenter one time, and it was like way harder. So
yeah, just go with just looking at the presenter, and it'll be fine.
Okay.
So emotional eating, what led you down that road to, hey, I want to study people's really emotion towards eating? Because we've all heard, and they come out with it on the news, what to eat, what not to eat, but they never really address the emotion side of thing and how people interact with food and look at food.
Yeah, it all started actually when I was kind of beginning my journey in the world of health and wellness, and I became a personal trainer. And I had clients who would come to me, and I would give them the quote textbook perfect plans, right? Do this, follow this. And what would happen is they kept coming back to me week after week. I didn't do that. We didn't get results, right? We weren't getting the results. And I was like, why not? Well, I'm not doing what you say. And I said, well, if you follow this plan, you're going to get these results. And they kept coming back over and over again saying, I'm just having a hard time following the plan. And that's what really led me down the path to realize that these plans, these diet programs, these textbook perfect programs that we're trying to follow are actually setting us up for failure, because they're not capturing a lifestyle of messiness. So that's really what got me started in this area of trying to understand, how do I help influence behavior and in an imperfect lifestyle, right? How do I help them create what they need to fit into their lifestyle?
What diets in particular did you kind of, I don't know, jump on or start with, if you can recall?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was mostly just, make sure you're eating your fruits, vegetables, lean meats. I don't know if it was a specific diet per se, but it was, just trying to help them follow nutrition guidelines. I mean, it was really basic, but even that was really hard.
Yeah, especially where the guidelines are so blurred, because it's the recommended daily amount is actually the lowest amount you should go, but people don't get educated that way. And then they're told, when I ask, like, okay, what diet? I mean, there's so many, the whole 30, the keto. I feel like people have gone down those routes And like you say, these diets don't teach behavior modification. They just say, just do this for X amount of days. And then what?
Yeah. And the biggest thing there, I think, I don't know if I'd say we were, following a specific diet, but it was all about restriction. So all
Mhm.
of these diets are about cutting food groups out, cutting different things out and restricting yourself. And as soon as we restrict ourselves, we build up a craving, right? As soon as someone says, you can't have that, what do you want?
That's the road. I think it's a great road to dive down, because restriction is usually where I go as a coach. And for me personally, I have a great control of restriction. Maybe some people, I would even consider myself maybe a little disordered when it comes to restriction in the past. But let's dive in where people hear restriction, they start to panic, right? And when in your kind of experience, you don't like to use that. How do you go about that? And what is it about restriction that really creates different emotions?
Yeah. I teach people that the concept of food freedom is recognizing that you are able to enjoy food in the capacity that you feel with particular boundaries. And I think it's important. Sometimes there's like we're on one side or the other, right? It's like extreme restriction or free for all. And there really is a balance. I think of it as a pendulum. There really is a balance. And sometimes, especially, people that have history with dieting, when they go really far on the side of restriction, it's almost like a swing. The further you pull the swing back, right, the further it's going to go in the other direction. And so a lot of times when people don't maybe have a handle on health and understanding nutrition and what they want for their goals and their body and all of that. And they struggle, like they just want weight loss, or they just want, to feel better in their body. And they don't quite understand the principles of nutrition, or they have just been told, this is bad for you. This is bad. You shouldn't eat this, right? When we don't have that higher knowledge, it kind of sets us up for failure. We restrict, and then we don't know what to do when we're hungry, when we're emotional, tired, right? All of those things. And so that swing has been pulled back so far that says, don't eat this, don't eat that, don't eat that. And when we don't have the tools to know what to do, we kind of let that swing go. We find ourselves in a pan of brownies or with some cookies, because it's all or nothing mindset.
Mhm.
And so there is a space for what you kind of considered restriction. I like to call it boundaries. I think sometimes words help,
Oh, that's a better way to call it.
yeah, they help soften things a little
Yeah.
bit, right? But there is a place for saying, hey, that doesn't serve my body in the way that I want it to be served, or it's not going to help me get to my goal or whatever I'm working toward, right?
Mhm.
That is a healthy boundary that we have. But sometimes the mindset of restriction sets us up for that heavy swing to, well, screw it, I'm just going to eat anything.
Correct. Even the word, just saying restriction. I mean, even as a kid, if I was restricted from doing something, I knew it was bad and I was in trouble. That goes a long way. And I really like that you changed the word, because then as you say that to someone, it now changes their emotion to a word that's very similar, but now they can probably comprehend it a little bit more without being threatened. Because I've always said, when I go into tell clients not to eat certain foods, or we got to cut back, you can tell that they get threatened,
Yeah.
because that's their comfort zone. That's what they know is simple for them, or their daily routine. And it's hard when it needs to start to change, and then you start eliciting more emotions. They don't know how to control that.
Yeah. And one thing that I always want to remind people is that emotions are not bad. So often, we are afraid of some of those feelings that might come up when we want to step into change. And the truth is, I believe, and I've seen it with my clients time and time again, that emotions are a really good indicator that something needs to change, right? There's something's off. And so it's actually really helpful to be aware of that emotion that you're experiencing, because then we can come in and say, okay, I see this emotion. What's off in my life that's causing this? I can deal with this. And then it doesn't have to have anything to do with food, right? Because
Mm.
sometimes we connect food and emotions so strongly, but so often it comes from just the emotion that we're experiencing is holding us back from what we want to do, where we want to go. And it's causing us to turn to food rather than stepping back and saying, hey, this is an emotion I'm having, and what do I need to do to deal with it without turning to food?
Especially nowadays, with people just telling, not everyone, but there's people out there telling like emotions don't matter, suppress them. But then I start to find people, when these emotions come up, their sympathetic system goes haywire and they have no idea what to do with them. It's more or less just retraining emotions in general and making people aware of, hey, you have these, and this is the vice food you're going to use to try to dampen that emotion, which is if you look at it from a human design, like it's a smart design that we have an emotion, but we can suppress it with certain foods. But then that system gets hijacked because we don't know how to control those boundaries.
Yeah, and it doesn't get at the root cause, right? I mean, what happens is it's a band-aid situation to say, "Oh, I'm just going to use food because I don't have the capacity or whatever it is to deal with that emotion." And so we just turn it into that band-aid approach, but I like to kind of think of it as if this is a really good example. If you were like, let's say you opened a drawer and you kind of cut your arm, like you kind of just cut your arm, and you put a band-aid on it and you start to heal it, but then you keep going back and you keep kind of cutting it, right? You keep kind of cutting it or getting it knocked. And it's the same idea where we keep going back without dealing with the problem, without taking that root cause approach toward healing.
Yeah. And then with the foods nowadays, because they're so palatable and dopaminergic, like you just keep going back and cutting yourself more and more, but the food's not beneficial. I don't know, when I've ever been, emotional, I'm not like, oh, I want to eat chicken and broccoli. It's like, no, you're going to go for foods that make you feel comfortable, comfort foods, and make you feel at ease, which in my opinion, there's too many of them on the shelves nowadays.
I 100% agree. And it's true. I mean, I think it's valuable for someone to recognize that these foods are made to be highly palatable. And so we just have to be aware of that. Like when I talk about intuitive eating and listening to your body's needs and what it wants, some people will say, well, what if my body just wants cookies all the time? You're right. But the truth is your body doesn't want cookies. It's that psychological habit loop that you've created. And also the connection to some of those foods that are made to be addictive. And so when we start to separate those two and recognize my body actually wants fuel, and this is what gives me fuel. And then we build evidence upon evidence that, oh, when I give myself fuel, I feel better. And we're less likely to really want those highly palatable foods.
And that's for sure. That's where a lot of people, I think, struggle when they'll hear you or even me, because I've said that to a lot of people. After a while, I don't have a really palate for some of those sugar foods, and it changes my perception of those foods. And I think it's very hard for people, maybe in your experience too, to see that. So when you're starting with someone initially, are you first talking nutrition? Are you going immediately to their emotional side of their life?
That's a really good question. And it's one of those, like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? Situation. And it really is a combination. I usually like to start more mindset, because a lot of times if they're coming to me, they've tried all of the other restriction based plans. So they've tried, like, oh, I'll just eliminate this, I'll do this, right? A lot of people have tried that. What they haven't tried is creating awareness with their body. And so that's really the first step that I would suggest to anyone, is starting to become aware. Start listening to what your body is telling you. When you were a baby, you were born with this amazing gift to know when you're hungry and when you're full. And if anyone's had a kid, they if they're done, they're done, right? And when they're hungry, they're hungry. And the diet industry has caused us to suppress those cues. But the truth is, those cues are still within our bodies. And when we can learn to tap into those cues and we can learn to say, okay, I'm going to be aware of what I'm eating. I'm going to listen to my hunger and my fullness, right? I'm going to eat when I'm hungry. I'm going to stop when I'm full. When we start to understand that, then we can kind of bring more of the principles of nutrition in, because we also need nutrition principles, or I guess you'd say macronutrients, in a particular balance that help our body use those cues, right? If we're not eating protein, we're not getting fullness cues, right? If we're not eating fiber, we're not getting some of those fullness cues. And so it does come together, but I really do suggest, if you are a chaotic eater, right? If you find yourself on the roller coaster of eating, struggling all in, all out, start with awareness. And then we can build in the nutrition strategy from there.
So when you start with awareness, is it when they're hungry or when their emotion comes up? Like how do you, when you're talking to them, how do you start? How do you, or if someone's listening to this, where would we start? If I'm all of a sudden feeling emotion, do I just sense what's going around me, what my body feels?
Yes. We have to start to kind of rebuild a relationship with our body. And if you've been told restriction for a long time, sometimes it's hard to create that connection. And so I'll give it to you. I have a free mindful eating meditation, but I recommend one meal a day for maybe a week or two. Just sit down and do this meditation, or even just sit down for 10 to 15 minutes and pay attention to your body. When you sit down, how is this food presented to you? What does it look like? As you taste it, how does it feel? How does your body feel as you're eating? Is it good? Like, is it something that you actually enjoy, or are you not really enjoying it, right? Sometimes we just have lost that touch with food. And as we become more mindful, we don't have to do that all the time. The goal is that we are, mindful out in the world and in a busy lifestyle. But that first step is helping you become aware of your body's cues. And your body is powerful. It's going to give you that cue to say, hey, I'm full. And a lot of times, if there's a overpowering emotion, we don't stop that cue, right? So when you're in the mindset of that mindful eating approach, then we don't have those emotions coming in and overpowering at that moment. So we would work on dealing with emotions, kind of, that would be the next step, is like, okay, we're identifying this emotion, but the first step really is getting in tune with your body and what it's telling you. Hey, what does it feel like when I'm hungry? Do you really know your hunger cues? And what does it feel like when I'm full? Do you really know your fullness cues? And that's the first thing that you need to figure out before we can then tackle, okay, I recognize this is an emotion, not a physical hunger cue.
Yeah. That's where most people, I would assume, they don't even attempt, because they don't know. And a lot of people in the realm I work, they can't sense their body or know where there's in space. Now we're telling them to sense how their body feels just by sitting and eating, which I think that's an amazing step one, because we're not really talking nutrition. We're more talking neurology now. We're talking how the brain functions. And that's one thing that's very important to me, because a lot of people just skip that step. So we got step one down. So it's mindset first, and this meditation mindfulness. And you said step two is now you're going to start bringing emotions into their thought process.
Yes. So then we start to, I would actually probably say step two is kind of incorporating some of this nutrition strategy with
Okay.
it, right? How are we balancing our meals with proteins, carbohydrates, fats, fibers, right? How are we getting that balance that we need? Because then we can say, okay, I have all the tools that I need to meet my body's needs, right? Meet those cues. I have my hunger and fullness cues, and I also understand nutrition. So I can say, yeah, I've got a good amount of protein. Well, then we can go into what happens when I want to just go straight for the ice cream, or I just want to go straight for the chips.
Yeah.
And that's kind of that next step of saying, okay, biologically, maybe I'm not hungry here, right? The first part was really biological hunger. Now we're looking at emotional hunger, and what do we do? And the first step is really identifying that, separating it from the physical hunger. Okay, physical hunger is I need to eat something and I need to eat the right nutrients to satisfy my body. And sometimes that's as simple as it is, right? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm hungry.
Yep.
Like it could be like a day where you skipped lunch and it's 4 o'clock and you're just like dying and it's emotional at the moment. But the reality is you actually really are hungry. You just need to feed your body. But let's just say it's not, right? You say, okay, I've eaten everything, but I'm having a rough day. I'm stressed. I'm overwhelmed. I want to go for this food. The first step is exactly the first step that we talked about with this mindful eating scenario is mindfulness, awareness. Hey, and I tell my clients to name it. Hey, I know you're, and then you name the emotion, your stress, your overwhelm. And we name the emotion. And as soon as we name it, we can separate it from going down that path, right? Spiraling out of control. We can say, okay, I see that this is here. And I can separate and say, I know that food's not going to help me. So now I'm going to go down this path and have a dialogue with myself about what do I need to serve that emotion.
Gotcha. And do you have, for different emotions, do you have different paths, or is it different emotions? People, because every human's different, have different paths for those emotions, and then you have to kind of navigate their own specific path.
Yeah, it's very similar to the mindful eating, right? What you need to eat is different than what I need to eat. And so you have to be aware of your body's needs, and I need to be aware of my body's needs. So what you start with is, okay, you identify the emotion, and then you ask yourself, what do I need? So if I'm feeling really stressed or overwhelmed, probably the biggest thing that I need is to just like chill out for a minute, whether it's a nap or take a walk or something. That I like to tell people, the simplest way to do this is think of the opposite of the emotion. So you're stressed, you're overwhelmed. What's the opposite? Calm, relaxed. Well, you ask yourself, what can I do now? What can I
Gotcha.
do in this moment? Do I have 5 minutes? Do I have 10 minutes? Do I have 30 seconds to take some deep breaths? Because it's going to be different for everyone. We can't always just sit down and journal out our emotions all the time, or, call the person that we're angry at, right? Sometimes dealing with the emotion is a lot of work.
Yep.
But if we can get ourselves out of that heightened state, right? That heightened emotional state and into the other place, then from there, we can ask ourselves, okay, now that I have all this information, now that I've met those needs, how am I feeling now? Do I still want to maybe enjoy the cookie mindfully without it being an emotion that leads to guilt and shame? Then great, right? But and that can help us find balance with some of the fun foods, I guess we'd call them, where we can
Yeah.
find some balance with them. But we've been able to separate our emotions from connecting it with the food to deal with it.
So really, really taking that time to create time and space in your thought process to let emotions just dampen. And it's kind of one thing that's very much trending, whether it's breathing or slowing things down, box breathing. It's very much just like you're taking your brain, you're almost your frontal lobe, and distracting it from that emotion that gets triggered. And it's like, okay, then you can make decisions based off of a different mindset. So it really doesn't come down to nutrition at all. It's I was looking at it as you're mindful of the stress, then you make the nutrition decision, but it's really you're mindful of the emotion. I should say stress, the emotion, that you understand the emotion, and then you kind of take time, then you make a decision after that on nutrition or whatever it could be. It might not be specific nutrition. In your case, you're remapping people's brains to look differently at certain food choices.
Yeah. And honestly, it really is about just allowing a little bit of time. We live in a very busy world, and sometimes for lack of a better word, snarfing food, right? Like we're just grabbing and going, and we're not even paying attention to, is this a hunger cue, or is this like emotion, or I've just got to get something because I've got to get out of the door. And if you just gave yourself some of that time, 30 seconds, just be aware of those feelings, it's so much easier to make a decision from there. And it sounds so big, but the reality is when you allow a little bit of time for awareness, it's magical.
Yeah, just slowing your system down just to pull back the sympathetic drive. And for that, is that the biological hunger versus the emotional hunger? Is that the last step, or is there one more step in this, in your almost your algorithm of treatment?
Yeah. So what I would say from there is it's it's an ongoing exploration,
Mhm.
right? Of it's a practice. I think that's maybe what I would say is, a mindful eating is a practice. Being an intuitive eater, being a consistent eater, whatever word you want to use, it's a practice. It's not something that we can just say, okay, for 30 days I'm going to do this or I'm going to give this up, I'm going to say no. I need to be mindful. And one of the analogies I really like to share with my clients is about potty training, which
All
sounds
right.
kind of silly, but I'm a mom and I have
Hey,
3 kids, and so I'm
we've all
potty
had to
trained.
do it.
Yeah. And when we're first potty training, so for anyone that hasn't done this, when you're first potty training a kid, you are all hands on deck. Like you are at home and you're not going anywhere because you're like teaching them how to use those cues. So the very beginning, it's all hands on deck. And there's lots of accidents, there's lots of practice. You're trying to teach them, right?
Mhm.
A few days goes by and you're like, okay, maybe we could venture to the park. Like I'm starting to get used to this, or I'm starting to know these cues. This child starts to learn their cues. And eventually this child can go potty anywhere. You could be at the mall, you could be at the restaurant, and it's not even a big deal, right? Well, it's the same thing with the practice of mindful eating and getting in tune with your body. At first, it can feel a little bit like potty training where it's like, this is a lot for me to do, especially if I haven't ever done it before, right? Connecting with my body, it takes a lot of effort and energy. But the whole point is that when we start to create that connection and we recognize those cues, we can utilize those cues anywhere. We can go to a restaurant or an event and not be afraid of overeating or blowing our diet because we have the skill and the practice of it.
That's where I think a lot of people, when they look towards certain diets or steps or algorithms, that's why I asked this question, is they think it's like, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, stop. But really it's step 1, step 2, step 3, circle back to step 1, because this is behavior. It's going to happen every day with decisions that we go through life every single day. One big thing I think people have a hard time grasping when it comes to the health and nutrition field and decision making behavior is this an ongoing, like people ask, oh, how do you have motivation or discipline? Like it's an ongoing loop of that algorithm of here's what many successful people do: mindfulness first, then you're setting your nutritions, your macros, then you're going to go, okay, emotions, here we go. What's the decision? Break. Something else is going to come up later in the day. Like you can't escape emotions ever. We're built off of them, and they're wonderful things that we have. Everyone has been hearing about the benefits of creatine nowadays. And if you haven't heard about this supplement, then you need to get up to speed. Creatine can improve athletic performance, strength, endurance, help with high intensity exercise, helps aid in recovery, helps strengthen the cognition, the neuronal network, the mind, and increases mitochondrial health. With many people getting on the creatine path now, there's an easy way to get it in. Chewable creatine, simple, easy, and fast. No mixing it, just grab and go. Now you can get Swoley creatine gummies. Grab your daily dose and get all the benefits. Go to getswoley.com and get on the creatine game. At checkout, use the code TFL for 20% off your creatine order.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking of a couple of diets that are kind of popular, like Whole30. So 30 days and then
Yep.
you're done, right?
Yeah.
Or 75 hard. So
Ugh.
your brain has created in your mind, okay, I just need 30 days. I just need 75 days. And
Correct.
it's this like grit, like you all of a sudden are just like, I've got to grin and bear it for that long. And people don't always love me when I say, actually, this is a lifetime pursuit and we don't have to change everything overnight. Don't get scared of that. But the reality is it's more than 30 days. And I have another analogy I really like, sprinters versus long distance runners. Sprinters have muscles that are created to go hard and fast, and distance runners have muscles that are created to go long and slow. And if you were to try to, as a sprinter, try to run a mile, it probably wouldn't work very well. You haven't trained your body to do that, right? And so we have to think of health from a distance perspective. We need to train our body to run, a little bit slower, maybe.
Mhm.
Like sometimes that's hard for people to hear, but sometimes, when you're training for something, maybe you're training for something that you have to push toward. I think there are times and seasons where we have goals that we work toward,
Yeah.
but going hard all the time, like thinking about doing 75 hard for the rest of your life, I can't even imagine. I think a lot of
Right.
people would have a hard time doing something like that. And so if we can visualize that, okay, I'm training for life, it helps make things feel a little bit easier,
Yeah.
doable.
Balances our neurological system, because I've known people that go 75 hard and they've taken it now to like, I think it's 100 something days hard, but they don't know how to switch, right? It's
Yeah.
either that all or nothing. I want to say it's a bad thing, but you're creating such a rigid behavior and they don't have the tools to have, like you said, that sort of, you're slowing yourself down. Can you make a decision that you're going to be okay with? And if an emotion comes up there, you're not going to freak out and be like, hey, I have to stick on one path, because life happens, right? We do go through, go to different restaurants and all this stuff. And I've known people that they won't go out and put themselves in those situations because they don't know how to emotionally handle it. So I'm glad you kind of brought up these certain diets, because I think on one hand they're good, but from the behavior side, they're not good, because it doesn't teach what people don't want to hear is it's a lifetime thing. This journey of health never ends, and it's cyclical, especially with nutrition. It can't just be like I go for a certain time, stop, then I go back to my normal behavior, then I try to pick it up again, because then people just start to yo-yo and it makes it almost even worse, I feel.
Yeah. And a lot of times for people that have been on and off these diets, restriction creates that fear.
Yeah.
And so there's a fear of eating a food that's not on the plan, because you have a lot of evidence that when you don't follow the plan, you lose control over the food. And so we have a lot of evidence on one side that the only way that I can stay in boundary is if I'm weighing and measuring and tracking all my food. And so we have to start creating some evidence on the other side that, okay, it's okay if we loosen the reins a little bit, for health, right? I'm
Okay.
not against anybody that has goals.
Oh yeah.
I think there's a place for that for sure. But when we think about a lifestyle of health, we want to do as much as we can to avoid that feeling of fear around food, or fear of messing up. Or a lot of women that I work with, have the fear of gaining weight. And so they're just so strict. And so we have to start building evidence that, you can be safe around these foods, you can eat them in moderation, and you can still reach your health goals.
Yeah. Would you say I would think that fear is probably one of the biggest emotions when it comes to eating. And you did mention women and weight, because I think I always get in these conversations. Sometimes they're good. Sometimes I ruffle some feathers, but females and weight, I know it's a big topic and I know some people don't want to talk about it, but you said the word fear with it. And that's a very, accurate things. A lot of my female clients and clients that I've talked to, they have a big fear of gaining weight. So then they start creating these negative behavior patterns towards food. In your experience and what you do, let's dive into the kind of that side. So women in either weight gain and the fear behind it, and how you go about helping them create balance through their approach to nutrition?
Yeah, the first thing that we really start working on is creating a better relationship with our body and recognizing that bodies are different, because for whatever reason, I think it's more prevalent in women. I mean, men still experience this, but there's a
Oh, yeah.
lot of body comparison
Mhm.
and a lot of comparing to an ideal, right? Of like, this is how it's supposed to be, comparing to someone else. And then another one that women really struggle with is comparing to their own selves. So, hey, when I was 20, I looked like this. Or before I had kids, I looked like this. And we compare our current self to the maybe ideal version of our old self or who we used to be, without coming in, like, without bringing in the discussion of like, maybe you've had children, maybe you're going through menopause. There's a lot of hormones at play specifically in women's bodies that cause their weight to fluctuate a little bit. And so we have to kind of come to terms with the fact that our bodies are made to fluctuate a little bit. And I believe this, just like in emotional eating, I think some weight gain actually can be a really good thing, because it allows you to identify something that's off. And you mentioned the fear. There's a lot of anger involved as well when women are like, I'm the heaviest I've ever been, or
Yeah.
I'm really struggling to get, back to where I want to be. And when we start to recognize that, okay, my body is good. It does good things. I can support it. It's worthy of being nourished and nurtured. Then I can kind of change some of those decisions that I make. And if I'm seeing that my weight is going up or I'm not in a happy place, I always tell people, don't get mad at your body, get mad at your habits. So go back and look at your habits. Okay. Your habits are what create your body image. And so if it's the same kind of idea as emotional eating, like separating from the emotions and saying, okay, I need to look at my habits. What am I doing? Am I eating an ice cream every night? Do I just have a habit of doing that? And it goes back to, maybe I need to deal with an emotion that's created that habit loop. But really, it's about creating that connection with your body and then looking at the habits that you want to create that support the body that you want to have. And I think it's so valuable to remind everyone that we don't all have to have the same health habits and the same bodies. Everybody has different goals and different desired lifestyles. And I think that's the power in being able to reconnect with your own body to say, what's important to me? Is this habit important to me? Is macro counting important to me because I want to maintain a really high level of physique? Do I want to be a bodybuilder or a figure competitor? That's a very different lifestyle than someone that says, I want to show up for my kids and my grandkids and I want to be active. And your body will match either one of those.
Of course. And I think a lot of people, they do see social media it's a good thing, but it's also a terrible thing because people, you said, are always looking at images of people in what they think is reality. But as you and I both know, it's not. And especially in the fitness world, when we used to scroll through those magazines, all those models and, bodybuilders were dieted down, and like, that's not what they look like daily. So it's imperative like to break open that sort of thought process to people, like, hey, this is just a snapshot of someone, and sometimes it was of someone years ago and they don't actually look like that anymore. So it is a big thing mentally to help people understand what their kind of individual goals and habits are that lead to where they want to be. And that's usually where I loop it back to, is when someone, like a client, makes a bad decision from a nutrition standpoint, I always say, ask them, did that help you towards your goals? If not, understand the decision you made. You can't go back and get mad at yourself and create worse emotions, but you have to step forward and create a different emotion the next time it happens, because it's going to happen again. Emotions are just going to keep happening every day of our lives. And that's where it's just cyclical.
Yeah. And I always tell people we can't always control the emotions that come in. There's a lot of things outside of our factors or outside of our, what we can control, but we can control what we do about them, right? We do have control how we respond. But sometimes we don't have control of if we didn't sleep through the night, if we're overwhelmed at work, if we're stressed, if we're tired, or something happened to a loved one, or right, like the world is in chaos. I mean, there's so many emotions that come in. We can't control that. Maybe we get in a car accident on the way home, and hopefully it's just a fender bender, but like we're stressed, right? But we can then learn, hey, I have a tool. And that's the most powerful thing is I have a tool to know what to do with this so I don't spiral out of control. And that could be applied. I mean, really, it could be applied to even more than health principles, right? When we understand how we can manage these emotions, it teaches us that we don't have to spiral out of control. I teach my clients, you spiral up even just one rung on the spiral, right? Like if you're struggling and you overate or you did something emotional, right? It's not perfect. A relationship with food is never going to be perfect. We're going to have times where we overeat. We're going to have times where the emotions get the better of us. And the cool thing is when you have the skills, right? When you have the practice, the skill comes in and says, hey, okay, I think about a spiral or a spring. I'm struggling right now and I can choose to keep spiraling out of control and eat more food and say screw it and all this stuff. Or I can just say, I just want to go one notch up. How can I spiral up? One notch. Okay, maybe I need to go on a walk, get myself away from the food. That's one spiral. And it's just like spiraling down out of control. We can spiral up in control.
Biggest thing right there. I love that.
Yeah.
So on your side, when it comes to, because especially you work with females, I think that's your kind of forte.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When you see that mindset, do you see that it changes from person to person, or are all females very similar into the spectrum of emotions that they feel and sort of the behaviors that you see come from there?
That's a good question. I think there's kind of general emotions and what I call habit loops. So you experience an emotion, you perform a habit, and then you get a particular reward or outcome. And there's a lot of general, there's some specific, but a lot of times when we're stressed, we turn to food, and then the outcome is we feel guilty and more stressed, right? Shame. So there are a lot of very similar emotions. There's a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. But the habits are probably the things that vary from person to person. Is what habit can I put here to give me the outcome that I want? So if I'm stressed and normally I turn to food and that causes guilt and shame, well, I can't really control that the stress is going to come in. Maybe I've got a stressful day, a stressful life, whatever. We can do some proactive things, and that's important. But there's some reactivity we have to deal with of, okay, the stress is coming in. Well, what's the outcome that I want here? Do I want to leave feeling gross and I've ruined it again and shameful, right? Or do I want to leave feeling like, okay, I'm calm? That's what I want to get to. I want to get to calm. And so I have to change that habit that helps me get to calm. And so that's where more of the consistency comes in, like some of the similar, you use that framework essentially to help you get to the outcome, but the particulars are a little bit different.
It's very interesting because you say guilt and shame, and that's just something I've never thought about. You hear people say it, but from a guy's perspective, I've never heard my other guy friends or say, oh, I feel shameful that I ate this. They'll just be like, well, I ate a piece of pizza. I was a fat ass for today, and then move on. But it's very interesting. That's why I asked the question, because we train a lot of female athletes, and it's very interesting to get kind of what someone's, especially a female side of it, what they're going to feel that I might not think about when I'm talking about nutrition to them, because I'm thinking one way, because I've never sensed that, but they might be thinking more guilt and shame, which to me seems like that's going to drive more emotions and more negative behaviors or just thoughts towards food. So it's a different perspective to take. And it's like, hey, now I'm thinking, how do you help someone who feels guilty and shameful from making a food decision that's not going to ruin their life, but it's drawing emotions that it, in the moment, it seems like it's going to ruin the rest of their day.
Yeah. It goes back, again, this kind of brings in this root cause. It goes back to identity. What does this woman believe about herself? Is she an athlete? Is she healthy? What is that identity that she has for herself? If she's someone that has created this story in her mind and this belief that I always fail or I'm less than, right? You train a lot of athletes, and so you have a population of pretty fit people. But within that population, you're still going to get that comparison. I think it's
100%.
it's nature, right? So
Yeah.
it's like that person's better than me. And someone that's a, I don't, quote unquote, I guess, couch potato is going to look at them and be like, what are you complaining about? But the truth is we all have it. And we have to step into the identity that we want, because when we have that, it builds that foundation, and it holds us, and it fortifies us against some of those, what I call outside noise, right? When we see those images, or we hear this is the way it's supposed to be done, or this is the way you're supposed to look. It's all this outside noise that's saying this is how it's supposed to be. And when we have that identity that's strong, like I tell my women, I'm a woman of wellness, right? What does that mean to you? When you have that identity, then the choices that you make typically align with that. And so you start to make better choices and you start to feel better. I mean, think about it. When you don't feel good, when you make bad choices, it begets more bad choices. Like, oh, screw it. I already feel gross. I might as well keep going.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing on the other end. When I start to feel good in my body and I'm confident in myself and I'm confident in my choices, making a quote bad choice here and there isn't going to spiral me out of control, because I can return to that identity.
Yeah, and ideally, I'd want people, anyone, to make that they say they made a bad choice, to say, okay, I understand it. I'm not going to make it again, and move on. But I know people get fixated on that, and it's understandable that people do. So in your method, you've set boundaries, taken out the word restriction, set boundaries. What other methods in your kind of strategies to get someone back on? Because I know you don't really use the word diet. It's more of like maybe a plan. How do you kind of phrase it so people aren't like, hey, okay, she's just going to tell me what not to eat again. I've heard it 100 times. After boundaries, where do you go?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think what I would probably bring in here is I kind of teach a framework for people. So when we're thinking about a healthy lifestyle, there are some components of a healthy lifestyle that you need to have. And the first thing that I usually tell people is start with movement. Movement makes your body feel good. And so when you're moving your body, you're feeling better. And then we kind of move into that mindful eating and nutrition strategy. And what I suggest is, rather than looking at what we restrict, we create a nutrition strategy that helps us get as many nutrients. So I love there's Precision Nutrition. Have you heard of them? Are you?
Yeah, I am
fan
actually
of them?
PN certified. So,
Oh, perfect. Me
yeah.
too. So they have a really cool guideline, palm portion guideline,
I love
where,
this.
yeah, it teaches you how to eat the right balance of macronutrients for your specific body. And I love that, because we're not coming in and saying restriction. We're saying, here's an image, right? It's really easy to visualize it, and we can go specifics if we want, but here's an image of what your plate should look like based on the nutrients that your body needs. And that instantly shifts from don't eat this to, hey, get started here. Start to balance your plate. Get your palm portion of protein, get your fist of vegetables, and balance that plate. And then recognize that fun foods are fun foods. They're extras. And we don't want to have a lot of extras, but they have a place in our life. And when we have been able to kind of master that nutrition strategy where we have that balance, the fun foods aren't as appealing, just like you mentioned,
Right.
because you're serving your body with the nutrients it needs. It's not craving all that fun food all the time.
And it is a good reference when you say the palms are for protein, the fists for veggies, and was it thumb for like fats and nuts?
Yeah.
Um, what's carbohydrates? I forget. Is
Cup,
that
like a hand cup.
handful?
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier when people are like, "Oh, I have to measure this out and that." I don't know about you. I don't measure anything. I think it's kind of a waste of time, and my time's precious. And then you become almost like, if you have to measure, you have to measure everything. But the framework of what PN does in that palm, cupful, fist size, thumb, it gives people a real time thought. Okay, 2 servings. Sometimes I'll tell people go 2 palmfuls of protein.
Yeah.
They're not even thinking about those dessert foods or anything else because they're already full. Then they move to the veggies, and by the time the veggies are done, they're like, I really am not hungry for carbs. I'm like, this is the easy way to help people kind of visualize and understand, and they're not feeling overwhelmed from, oh, I have to buy a scale. What's 7 ounces of protein? Because it all circles back when people start to worry about, oh, I have to get X amount. What's 7 ounces? They panic and they're going to go back to what they know because they don't want to have to deal with stress coming in. So that's where I do love PN and love that recommendation of look at your hand and using that as measures and go more of the palmfuls of protein, fistfuls of veggies, and you're going to be pretty dang good.
Yeah. And you are almost going to eliminate the emotional eating component.
Yeah.
Like truthfully, as soon as your body is given what it needs, we're not going to be dealing with as many emotions because it's not as difficult to say no to something when I don't really want it because I've listened to my body and my body has what it needs. So it's not like, oh, I have to avoid it, I have to restrict it. I got what I needed and I feel good. And so it's almost, it makes that emotional eating a very small part of life.
Yeah. And even when people do, like they say they stray and they come to me like, oh, well, I wasn't the best last night and I didn't eat what you kind of recommended. I'll ask them, okay, how'd you feel 10, 15 minutes after you ate it? And they're like, oh, I felt like crap, or I felt worse. I'm like that's your kind of your intuition saying, hey, I didn't feel good. Your system's not liking what you put in. And then they get back on track and they're like, yeah, I feel so much better. They're learning that curve. It's just like you said, they're taking that time, even if it might be after eating, that they're still, hey, here's what I feel, here's what I sense. Do I want to go back here? Probably not. No.
Yeah. It's the immediate gratification that sometimes we get stuck in.
Yeah.
And when we can step back, right? Again, kind of separate ourselves from that, we can just see, oh, I'm looking at, I can be nourished and satisfied with food that fuels my body and not have to worry about those extras like creeping in and that like craving, right? Cravings come because we're not nutritionally satisfied, I guess you'd say. I mean, when you don't have the nutrients that your body needs, your body's craving something and you need to give it what it needs. And if we just connect the emotion, it's like, oh, well, I'm craving ice cream. But the truth is your body might be craving protein.
Right. It's just
which
like
is hard for people to hear.
Yeah. That's like, when in doubt, just eat protein. Like if you're craving something, it's what's good place to start. Right. I tell a lot of people, but that's why when we have people like you or anyone talking nutrition, we know it's going to be kind of threatening to someone's comfort zone. And that's how we want it to be, because we want to get people thinking, hey, that comfort zone, we're going to push it a little bit. It's okay to get uncomfortable, but try to digest and understand everything that we're going to say and start small on the behavior modifications. If you're someone that can't handle a boatload at once. And some people can, some people like, hey, I can set boundaries and we can go right into it. Other people, it's like, you got to pull them through that discomfort zone slowly.
Yeah. And I like to remind people that they're also in a discomfort zone staying where they are. Yeah. Right. I mean, like you're miserable if you're not feeling good. And so there's work on both sides. There's effort on both sides to stay in this or to get out of this cycle. And, it really is about deciding what direction you want to go.
Absolutely. Well, I know we're coming up close on an hour here. Do you have any other points that you want to get to? I mean, we hit a lot and it was great.
Oh, mate, let's see. I don't know if I have anything specific. The biggest thing that I really think could maybe like wrap this up and tie a bow on it kind of thing is um create that relationship with your body. So often we have a disconnect with our body. We're just chaotically eating, chaotically living life. And the truth is, when we start to create that relationship, our body will give, right? It's just like a relationship, like with your spouse or a significant other. When we spend time with them, when we're kind to them, when we nourish them, that relationship improves and it gets better. When we ignore them, when we're rude to them, that relationship crumbles. And so when we start to build that relationship with our bodies and say, hey, I'm going to listen to you, and I trust that you're going to tell me what I need. And that's really scary, especially if we've been in the diet cycle for a long time or on those diets, that it can be really scary to be like, I can't trust my body. But the truth is, those cues are in there. We just need to connect with them. And that's what happens when you start to say, okay, we're going to work together, right? You're going to give me what I need. I'm going to give you what I need. And then your body will, truthfully, it'll naturally change. Your body's going to match your habits. So as you start to naturally change those habits, it's going to naturally change. And it doesn't have to be this insane, difficult effort.
No, people make it out to be much more than it is, but it starts with the mind. It all starts with the neurology of the mind. So as we're wrapping up here, where can people find you, find your services, and what do you offer?
Yeah. So since we're on a podcast, I actually have my own podcast. It's called the Woman of Wellness Podcast. And we talk a lot about, our relationship with our bodies and food and habits and all of the above to become a woman of wellness. So that's a fun place. I really love doing podcasts. I have a healthy habits membership. It's called our Women's Wellness Hub. And it's for any woman that's like, I really want to start creating healthy habits for my life. And I want to do it without starting over, right? Especially if anyone's in that cycle of starting over. I did it in 30 days and then I started over, or I'm just in this cycle. And that's what I help you create those sustainable habits inside that membership. So we also have a food freedom program where I go a little bit deeper on relationship with food and all of that for women that need that deeper work. But really it's about that identity and helping women come to that identity of, I'm a woman of wellness and I make these choices because I know who I am. So I'm there. I'm on Instagram, A Woman of Wellness, website, A Woman of Wellness. So it's pretty easy to follow along.
Yeah. And if anyone, you're listening, you want to get on that behavior path, there you go. Go check that out. The Woman of Wellness .com, podcast, Instagram.
And I'll give you the mindful eating meditation link. So if anyone wants, it's free. If they want to go do that, it's just like a 6-minute audio meditation that just kind of helps you reconnect with your body, with food.
We're going to get more people connecting with food in their body through this. Like just the app, let's go funnel it. Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming on.
Matt Gluckman and Eric Menchie here from Think Fitness Life. Our entire careers have been dedicated to fitness, particularly how the mind helps the body. We've been around gyms and nutrition strategies for 25 plus years collectively, and nothing harms or helps better than your own mind, untrained or trained. Pushing beyond your limits, overcoming whatever's thrown your way, and making the decision to show up day in and day out as a lifestyle takes more soul than sand. And what I mean by that is when you can get your mindset and heart leading you consistently in the direction of your goals and dreams, well, it's just a matter of time before you have the performance, physique, or quality of life you're yearning for. See, your thoughts will stem from your beliefs, which will then lead you to action, which develop into your behavior and ultimately lead you to results. It's really that simple. Our process takes time and it takes open communication. It's amazing what pops up along the fitness journey to betterment, and we can be there every step of the way. To learn more or apply for coaching, visit www.thinkfitnesslife.com. Start recreating your life today.